My love and interest in wildlife started about the same time I started writing, actually, when I was about 6. Um, I loved any kind of book I could get about wildlife, um, and then also when I was 6, I learned what extinction was. And I remember saying to my parents, like, these species are gone forever. They're never coming back, and we're responsible for that. Like, I think when I was real little, like 4, I thought, oh, extinction, I think of dinosaurs that lived millions of years ago. And it was a real awakening for me to realize, no, this is happening now and we're causing it. And after that, I became just dedicated to doing everything I could to help wildlife. I remember I started this little organization in elementary school. I called it STES, which was short for Save the Endangered Species. And I would like rope my friends into doing chores for people, and we would get money from that, and then we'd pool the money together and donate it to like Greenpeace or Defenders of Wildlife. We would sell things door to door. I remember selling coffee out of my Muppet Show thermos to people for 25 cents a cup, and um, I would paint driveway rocks gold and sell them as like genuine gold nuggets for 25 cents. So that started really young. And as I got older, I was circulating petitions and things like that. I would ride my bike down to the local wildlife rescue center and muck out raccoon cages and stuff. And so then when I got into college, it was a hard decision between the arts, which I loved. I'd been writing and working with wildlife as long as each other. So I decided to do both. So my both of my degrees, my undergrad and graduate, are a mix of creative stuff like writing, screenwriting, and then field zoology, wildlife biology, biogeography, and things like that. So the worlds were always separate, though. I would write, and then I do wildlife research. I do mainly species presence surveys, which is where I'll go to a parcel of land usually protected by a land trust, and I'll set out remote cameras and bioacoustic recorders to see what species are using the property. And that allows us to know what kind of habitat we should improve and um, where we can improve that land. So, and sometimes we find endangered species there, which is exciting. So it was actually out on a survey in Montana. We were looking for wolverines and wolves, and I was setting up a acoustic recorder, and I thought, why aren't I writing about this? Up until then, I'd written a lot of horror and some science fiction, some cli-fi actually. And I thought, why aren't I doing this for a book? And one of my favorite things to read is science thrillers. And I thought, well, this is just a shoo-in for that. I'm in this remote place. It's like really isolated. And why don't I have a character who's a wildlife biologist who travels around to different protected parcels of land and is looking for species that are endangered, but meanwhile, she could get into all kinds of dangerous situations. And it just felt so right. I was so excited. I went back to camp that night and I immediately started figuring out who she was and where her first adventure should be. And because I was in Montana at the time, I thought, well, how about Montana? And how about wolverines? Because they're really threatened. There's only 300 or so left in the lower 48. So I really wanted to address their plight, but also tell a suspenseful tale with a really likable protagonist. So that's how Alex Carter came to be. I would use the scenery and the specific species and what's involved in tracking that species or recording that species presence to build the plot. So if it's like in the Montana book, she's on this old ski resort that's been donated to a land trust. So she's like the only one there, and she's staying in this old ski lodge that's kind of fallen into disrepair. It's pretty creepy. And there's parts of the roof that are leaking and winds howling through broken windows and stuff. So using that as part of the setting. And then, say, with the interior rainforest, with the Caribou book, which is the third one in the series, there's a lot of clear cutting going on and old growth. So using conflict with loggers, for example, or activists that are trying to save these trees. And in the case of the second book, which is set in Western Hudson Bay in the Canadian Arctic, I could use snowmobilers out on the ice, and so much of it, it was so neat to just use the scenery and use the species because each survey for the presence of a species is in a totally different kind of, like the fourth book is set in the desert. The next book's going to be set in Hawaii. So they're all just, it's a neat way to think, what can I do with this environment? How can I bring this into a play into the plot?